All right, well, we are right at 2 p.m. and I hope, looks like some more people are trying to join in, but I think we can go ahead and get started. Well, welcome everybody. It's so great to see so many familiar faces and names and some new names in here. So we thank you all for joining us today for this very important conversation. Many of all of us are now stuck in our homes, and mental health is an issue that we continue to talk about. But how is mental health related to workplace wellness, and why is it important for our companies and our employers to have mental health as part of our workplace wellness strategy and inclusion strategy? These are things that we are very much looking forward to have a conversation with you about today. Just a few housekeeping. If you are not speaking, which many of you will not, please put yourself on mute. But we would love to hear from you, your thoughts, what questions you have, what are you dealing with, what would you like to ask some of our panelists today. Please do feel free to put those in the chat box, and when we get to the Q&A session, I'd be happy to field some of those questions as we have time. Again, thank you very much for making time to join us. Today we'd like to start by just engaging with you a little bit and knowing you a little bit more before our conversation. So please take out your phones and text Sanjita P913 to 22333 to join the poll, or you can go to your web browser and you can type in pollev.com and you can enter Sanjita P913 and respond to the activity. Just going to allow a quick minute for everyone to get to that. Please feel free to use some of the emoji icons there, thumbs up or good to go. There's a few emojis that I'm not being able to see for now, but yeah, please feel free to use those. All right, this might be a good time to get to our next slide. We're hoping that our technology will work. So in one word, please tell us what brings you here with us today. I'm gonna try and join. There we go. Anxiety, information, learning, strength. I don't know if the emoji, what smiley emoji is about, but please continue to share your reasons why you're here with us today. I think we're seeing a lot of learning, insight, training, information, resources. Awesome. Let's get to the next question and do the same thing. If you've just joined us, we're just starting to do a quick poll. The directions for joining our poll is right up on the screen. You can either join by your web browser or you can send a text to 22333 and type in Sanjita P913 and you can join our poll. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you most describe your stress level today? 6 is coming up bolder, which means a lot of people are feeling 6. We have a 9, which is insightful. We have a 2, which is great. 7, 8, 4, a 9 is getting bigger, which means a lot of people are responding and telling us that our stress level is at 9 today. So 6 is getting bigger now, so a lot of people feeling 6. All right, well, thank you for joining our poll. We have one quick last question. So in one word again, let us know, what are your key stressors at this time? Uncertainty, anxiety, unknowing, which is probably also uncertainty, working from home, safety, Unknown. Wow, a lot of people are saying unknown, so that's kind of why it's blowing up bigger. Uncertainty, productivity. Please mute your phones if you've just joined us. Please mute your phones. Maybe I will, give me just a second and I might be able to mute everybody here. I cannot find the button to mute everyone, so we're just gonna keep rolling. All right. All right, thank you everyone for joining this. I think this gives a lot of insight for our presenters today, and hopefully we can address some of these and give you guys a lot of learning, resources, and frankly, a community of support as we are dealing with this crisis. So without further ado, I'm just gonna, if we've just joined us one more time, please mute your lines. Thank you. So just a few other upcoming events that I'd like to announce one more time. On May 13th, we are hosting Undesigned, a Red Line virtual tour. Please join us for that, as we're gonna have a very robust discussion after the virtual tour to talk about the impact of redlining even in our lives today, and how all of us can play a role in undesigning what was done. On June 4, we're looking forward to have a conversation about rebuilding healthcare, how we need to look into different pools of talent to build our healthcare workforce. And there's lots of blogs that we've been coming out with lately. Please feel free to check them out. A lot of resources. And besides all of these, there's so many other resources, programs, virtual events that the Greater Des Moines Partnership has been hosting lately for all of you. So please feel free to check our website and check dsmpartnership.com events for further information. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists today, who are going to share with us their expertise, resources, and so forth on this topic of workplace wellness as an inclusion strategy, trauma, resources, and what all of us can do. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Sherry and Zachary. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjita. As she just said, my name is Zachary Harper. I am the Director of Training and Development at Easter Seals, Iowa. I think the first important thing to really point out is that we're giving you a pretty light look at this, a pretty uncomplicated look at this, and this is a very complicated and deep topic. We're really going to go through the basics and try and make sure that we're all on the same page as far as what trauma is, what you can do about it, how it affects the workforce. But this really is a very long and storied term, and there's a lot that we've got to unpack. And so we're going to provide you as many resources as we can, and feel free to go through those as well. I'm excited to be here to at least get this discussion started. Like many people in this field, I did not come into it intentionally. I sort of stumbled my way in. I studied linguistics and classical Chinese and linguistics in college, and ended up here today. After a long time in this field, I've learned quite a bit about how trauma has affected those that we serve, and how that really applies to our team members, even that work with us, and hopefully the team members that work with and for you. As a linguist, I always like to make sure that we're speaking the same language, talking with the same points. And so we're going to start with what trauma is. And the history of trauma is also an incredibly interesting one. This is something which has popped up in literature for thousands of years. I think the first real reference that we've found to the effects of PTSD come from an Assyrian text from 4,000 years ago. It pops up in things like the Iliad, and Beowulf and the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's something we've seen for thousands and thousands of years. We've known about it, and even in Shakespeare here. But it's really been in the last few decades that we've come to understand the extent that trauma can reach. For a long time, we've known that it affected soldiers, it affected those who have suffered physical violence. But as Shakespeare said, it is some heavy business that we have here in hand. And in the last 30, 40 years, science has come out that has really shown exactly what trauma does and what its sources are. Next slide, please. So trauma is commonly used to describe an emotional response, normally to a stressful or shocking event. And while traumatic events can induce a lot of emotional reactions, real trauma is created when a person's ability to cope has been overcome. Their rational response is no longer activated. They find changes in people's neurological reaction during events. It really activates that fight, flight, or freeze mode, and for possibly years, decades down the line, the effects of that will still be seen. A lot of people think of it as a reaction to a physical event, but it happens just as much in psychological events, grief, loss, and it changes people's thinking patterns, their emotional responses to future events, even their biology. There's studies that have shown that the microbiology in people's cells will be affected by a traumatic event. Not everyone is going to be traumatized by the same event either. Some people will react completely differently to the same event. Some will have that fight or flight response, and other people may not. And so it becomes really difficult to untangle who has been traumatized by what and when. And for a long time, we've really grouped together trauma, stress, anxiety, and it's become very important, as I said, over the last 40 years, as we've learned more about trauma, to disassociate those and untangle them. We can go to the next slide, please. So we often use these three words to describe very similar situations, and to sort of give you an idea, and once again, very cursory overlook of what the difference between these three are. Stress is how a person reacts to anything that upsets our normal balance, our normal day-to-day, our normal routines, our comfort zone. When you're stressed is when you're getting pulled out of that normality. And it's not always a negative. A lot of people work really well during stressful situations. A lot of people thrive when they've got a slight amount of stress to drive them forward. Stress doesn't have to be something which pushes you down or causes trauma. It can be something which moves you forward. And so all trauma is stressful, but not all stress is traumatic. Anxiety is another very similar situation to trauma in that it's an emotional and physical response. It's got well-studied effects that it also has upon people. It creates a rush of adrenaline. And this is actually, once again, much like stress, can be a very positive thing. If you're thinking of hunter-gatherer societies and you're having an adrenaline rush as you're becoming anxious about being caught by something or being seen by something. It can give you the motivation to move. It can give you the motivation to make change. It can help you survive through change. But it can also be debilitating. Constant anxiety is something which can feed into trauma. Trauma can create anxiety. Anxiety can create trauma. Because of this, the two of them can become incredibly cyclical and difficult to pull apart from each other. Next slide, please. It is important that we understand, we often think of trauma as physical terms and major events, abuse, neglect, violence. But it also has that psychological aspect to it. Grief, loss. Some of the earliest references from things like the Epic of Gilgamesh are talking about trauma from the loss of a friend, trauma from the loss of a family member. These are the ones that can have very long-lasting effects and create PTSD a little bit more often. But they have shown pretty conclusively at this point that these little T's, these little traumas that can happen throughout a person's life, can have a lot of the same effects that a major event can have. Things like a lack of stability, that unknown, that fear of the unknown, that safety, social exclusion, including isolation, the secondary trauma of watching someone else or a friend go through a major event or even suffer through little traumas. And then, of course, poverty, financial stress, all of this has been linked up pretty heavily. And as you can see just from this list right here, this is a pretty comprehensive list of what we are dealing with right now. This cumulative emotional trauma is much like a physical injury that you get from repetitive motion. And it can have the same effects as a tear of a hamstring or knocking something out of a socket. And we're seeing these a lot today, right now. trauma is also something that we often assume that someone else has. And at this point, we're going to be looking at a coming crisis of how do we handle at least 30 to 40% of the workforce now who is being daily tiny trauma from each of these accumulated traumas. And the longer it lasts, the longer it can go on, and the more likely it is to end with the same effects that a major event will have. Instability, constant fear and dread, that isolation, that inability to talk with loved ones. Everyone is going to be experiencing this throughout these last 2 months and for however much longer it's going to be going on. Next slide, please. And so what can this do to you? Now that we've sort of realized that nearly everyone is going to be feeling at least some sort of small trauma accumulating over this time, the effects of it can be pretty debilitating. There's 2 levels of reaction to trauma. There's an immediate reaction and then a more delayed response that can happen. Nearly everyone who experiences a traumatic event or a series of small traumas are going to have this short-term reaction to it. And I'm sure many of you out there are going to understand and see some of these and hear some of these and be like, oh yeah, that was me on day 3 of this whole crisis. Physical effects such as nausea, faintness, exhaustion, or the opposite, inability to sleep, which was me. Cognitive, difficulty concentrating, memory problems. There's a behavioral aspect to this due to the lack of sleep and everything that comes with not sleeping, or due to sleeping too much and everything that comes with sleeping too much. Identified argumentative behavior, becoming too defensive. Increased alcohol, drug, and use. Who here hasn't had a few extra drinks lately? Withdrawal, who has completely taken themselves out of their situations with other people that they know. There's even existential effects that they've linked to trauma. The loss of self-efficacy, the loss of belief that you have any power over yourself, your well-being, as we saw how many people said unknown here. Depression is heavily linked to the effects of trauma. And these are just the things that happen in the short term, right after this accumulated trauma has happened, or right after a major traumatic event. Left untreated or left without some coping mechanisms or some sort of help, these can develop into long-term consequences of their own. Depression, heart, liver, and autoimmune diseases are all linked to trauma. Flashbacks, which is one of the most well-known ones. Avoidance, hopelessness. Even when not developing into something that meets the criteria of a diagnostic PTSD, intermittent or contextually specific responses and triggers can remain for a lifetime, even for those who have only maybe had a short-term amount of trauma. Essentially, this means that the health and well-being of everyone during this pandemic is going to be at risk moving forward. Next slide, please. And as the trauma is going to continue to accumulate, these immediate long-term effects are clearly going to have an impact on the workplace and have had an impact on the workplace. Everything from an increase in sicknesses completely unrelated to COVID, to reducing productivity due to your lack of ability to concentrate. Teams aren't going to be able to function as well together, not just because we're all being split up, because the pressure and the pain and the effects that this has on your ability just to have a calm conversation is going to be affected. People are going to lose their personal drive. They're going to not really have that self-efficacy to think that there's even any point to move forward and learn more. Decision-making and creativity are going to be disrupted. There's going to be a difficulty with building trust within team as everyone deals the effects of this and believes that no one else is going to help them deal with the effect of this. Which is why addressing trauma and helping people to develop healthy coping mechanisms is going to be such an important skill moving forward for workplaces. If we're going to prevent a national mental health crisis from following this physical health crisis, we're going to have to make sure that we're putting the work in. So to help with this, go through that aspect of it, I'd like to hand it over to Sherry.
Thanks, Zachary. Hi, everyone. My name is Sherry Nielsen. I'm the president and CEO of Easter Seals. I've spent the majority of my life working at Easter Seals and supporting wonderful team members who are out there on the front line supporting our clients live their best life. I am a mother of 5. So through those experiences, I would say that I have learned a little bit about resiliency, but I would not say that I'm an expert. I'd say I'm a student on a journey to learn and practice the skills of resiliency, because I believe that those skills are vital to living healthy. So I'm going to start kind of with a definition of resiliency. It is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, and threats. It's not just about getting by and bouncing back. It's about experiencing personal growth. When we experience growth during and after adversity and tragedy, we transform trauma instead of transfer it. I'm sure if you think about it for a few minutes, you can think of a situation where you knew 2 different people going through the same difficult situation, and one person thrives and the other drowns. It is their personal resiliency skills that drive the outcome and determine if they are able to respond or react. It is important to remember that life experiences are different for everyone because we see the world in different lenses. Those lenses are colored by prior trauma, adversity, and coping skills, and therefore resiliency looks different for everyone. Next slide, please.
From a 1.6 to like a 0.4.
So let's dig a little deeper and talk about some of the realities. So the research prior to COVID-19 shows that 66% of the general population has experienced trauma in some form. 80% of our workforce was already reporting high stress levels associated with their job. At that time, 1 million American workers called in sick each and every day. And did you know that 50 to 70% of disease is thought to be related to stress? So now let's add COVID-19 on it. It has caused trauma across the world. So for some, it will be the little t that Zachary referred to, and for others, it will be the big T. Each of us and our team members have had a variety of new and different thoughts that are questions and barriers that we didn't have 9 weeks ago. Some of those might be, what if someone I love gets COVID? What if I get COVID? Am I gonna have a job? Am I gonna be able to take care of my family? Is my child learning? How can I get my job done and stay safe? It could be, hey, my job just doubled because of the impact of COVID. How can I work and care for my child? These are just some of the questions. Perhaps you or the people you're leading are feeling isolated. We are all used to the term social distancing now, but for some people, that social distancing is increasing social isolation. We know social isolation is a determinant of health. It causes more long-term health issues than any other vice. There's some research that shows that isolation causes more damage than smoking 7 cigarettes a day. People who fall into minority groups have experienced higher levels of social isolation because of how society has treated them. Social isolation isn't about being alone. It's about not being included and connected. So we can assume that COVID-19 has increased that social isolation because of things like poverty and the digital divide. Next slide, please. So let's do a quick audience poll. Using the same method that Sanjita started us out with, please text in your response to this question. Do you believe resiliency is a result of nature or nurture?
All right, we're gonna give people a quick minute to do that. And I'm just gonna flip my screen quickly to make sure that I in fact activated the poll, which I think I did, but let's, there we go. I'm sorry, give me just a second. I can't see what you guys are seeing, but there we go. Is it working now?
I'm not seeing anything.
Okay, can we try this one more time, friends? Can you type your answers one more time?
You know what? I can see some people's coming up with the comments. So we'll give it a few more minutes, and I'm going to tell a story why Sanjita monitors, and we'll see if we have a percentage or not. But while you're putting your numbers in, there is a study that shows that the majority of people believe that nature causes the most results prior to having children. And then once they have children, they decide that nature is in control. So after going through some of my own parenting situations, there are times that I would have liked to say it's all about nature and it wasn't anything that I contributed to. Do we have any results yet, Sanjita?
Yes, give me just a second. It didn't pop up in here, but it is showing in my actual poll here. So give me just 1 second so I can share the screen with all of you. All right, can you see that now? Yeah.
So 63% of us on the call think that nurture has a bigger role to play. So in fairness, it was a trick question. Research actually shows that the ability to be resilient is impacted by both nurture and nature. In fact, there are some studies that show a strong tie between the APGAR score, which is the assessment that is given to children right after birth, and that child's ability to handle adversity through elementary school. There is a genetic predisposition for resiliency that includes factors such as early life environment, early life circumstances, trauma, and adversity. People who have experienced the complex trauma or the big T that Zachary talked about may have feelings of shame, brokenness, unworthiness, and have an external locus of control. Therefore, they build survival skills early on. However, their skill set is really based on fight or flight instead of a healthy set of resiliency skills. Genetics, early life experience, and luck, those can't be modified, but resiliency can be taught. Next slide, please.
I was just going to read some comments that came through since we're struggling with our poll. A lot of people said nature, nurture, both are at play. I agree, both are at play, both. So I just wanted to mention that before we went to the next slide.
Well, clearly I didn't trick anyone with my question. You guys are all over it. Okay, so you don't drown by falling in the water, you drowned by staying there. A coworker shared this quote with me last week, and I love it because knowing what to do when you get in the water gets you out of the water. Just like knowing what to do when you're in adversity and preparing for adversity helps you move through adversity. Resiliency is like a muscle. It takes time to build, and our uniqueness of humans means that we build resiliency at different rates. We know that experiencing challenges and failure is a necessary tool for building resiliency. Next slide, please. The reality is that the road to resiliency does involve emotional distress. It's important to remember that resiliency is ordinary. It's not extraordinary. We can all do it. With the right thoughts, behaviors, and action, everyone can increase their resiliency skills. Next slide, please. So let's start talking about some practices that we can deploy or start to build to help us build personal resiliency. The number one factor in building resiliency is strong, healthy relationships. Research has showed us that this is the number one indicator. Fear and anxiety make us feel alone, and when we have people to walk our journey with us, it allows us to move to recovery and experience growth through adversity. We are built to have connections. It's important that you have people in your life that you trust and that you do make time for connectivity. But it's also important that you be someone's person. That means that you provide them with empathy and that you let people know that they're not alone. It requires us to be vulnerable. So the second thing that we want to focus on is we want to avoid rumination. Rumination is when we focus on the worst case scenario. I can be really good at this sometimes. What happens when we're there is our negative thoughts spin out of control. We do all of this, and some of us are more, we all do this, some of us are more verbal than others. But when we're in that phase, we really need to stop and be aware of our thoughts. We need to be able to recognize and know that we're there right away, because ruminating gets us nowhere positive. When we stay in that zone of rumination, we tend to spiral in negative thoughts, producing more stress for ourselves, which makes us unable to develop solutions. Rumination is the enemy of resiliency. So we have to start by acknowledging the adversity and owning it. So for example, in this pandemic, we need to understand and we need to verbally say, it's a trauma, it's scary, we're all uncertain. We need to be kind to ourselves, but we don't need to spend hours in front of the news. We do need to be informed, and we need to make sure that we're balanced. We need to look at things such as 50 to 60% of our population is going to contract the illness. And of those, 80% are going to have a mild to moderate case. We need to determine what's in our control and then focus on steps that are going to help us, our families, and our organization manage through this time of adversity. Instead of ruminating, we want to move to reflection and reframing. When we reframe adversity, we find opportunity, and then we're able to experience growth. This is not new to any of us, but it does need to be said. We have to practice wellness. Sleep, exercise, good nutrition, and hydration allow the body to fight off stress and anxiety. High levels of stress and anxiety minimize your ability to be creative. It makes it difficult to develop solutions, and you miss the opportunity. Another way to build resiliency is to practice mindfulness. So research shows that 70% of us are walking around on autopilot. We don't pay attention to how we are thinking or feeling. This fact actually made me feel good. I wasn't the only one putting milk in the cupboard and saying yes to my children's questions, only to find out later that I agreed to something I definitely would have said no to. When we practice mindfulness, we make it a point to be aware and control where we are putting our attention and energy. We practice self-compassion. We recognize that we are having negative conversations and thoughts, and we stop and ask ourselves, if I continue to focus on the negative emotions, is it getting me where I need to go? Different people use different techniques to grow their ability to be mindful. So one technique is prayer and meditation. My mom always used to say, if you worry, don't pray, and if you pray, don't worry. Therefore, I try to pray every morning and every evening, because I've noticed when I do, it helps me stay aware of how my thoughts impact my actions and how my actions impact others. If you don't want to believe my mom, I'm telling you it's your loss, but maybe you should check out some research done by Sean Aker. He's the author of The Happiness Advantage. It's one of my favorite books. I want to read to you a paragraph from it. Neuroscientists have found that monks who spend years meditating actually grow their prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain most responsible for feeling happy. Meditation takes practice, but it's one of the most powerful happiness inventions. Studies show that in the minutes right before meditation, we experience feelings of calmness and contentment, as well as heightened awareness and empathy. And research even shows that regular meditation can permanently rewire the brain to raise levels of happiness, lower stress, and improve the immune function. And we all need that right now. If you don't like to read, I want to let you know that you can Google Sean's name, and there's some great YouTube videos out there with pieces of his message. So another technique for mindfulness is journaling. Journaling allows you to get in touch with your feelings. It gives you a safe place to process, say what you really feel, identify problems. But if you end your journaling with taking some time to think about what you were grateful for that day, it forces you to recall good things in your life, allowing you to experience increased endorphins and naturally lower your stress levels therefore resulting in an increase in creativity. Another technique is yoga. I personally can't touch my toes, but I have a lot of friends who practice yoga, and they talk about how a session of yoga really increases their relaxation and ability to focus on the right things. Last but not least, you need to identify your purpose. Research shows that those of us that live with purpose live longer, experience more peace and resiliency. Some people call it a calling. Other people say it's what they were made for. But you know when you are living with purpose because you are energized. You're intentional about how you're spending your time and how you're feeling, and you feel like you have a sense of control. Typically, you're doing what you love, and in that process, you're making the world a better place. Practicing mindfulness will help you identify your purpose. You can also find purpose by joining different civic groups, volunteering, and experiencing new activities. Next slide, please.
Sherry, may I? Well, I don't want to interrupt you, but there were a few things that were coming in my mind that, thanks for sharing. So I think I'm writing notes. I hope everybody else is. I just wanted to make the connection to a workplace for employers, for employees. We may think about healthy relationships, wellness, mindfulness, and purpose for us in our personal lives, but I know all of you would agree with me that all of these are strongly related to a workplace too. So that is why we need to make that connection as an inclusion strategy to have workplace wellness and making sure that mental health is a big part of it, because if I don't have healthy relationships in my workplace, there is nobody that I can rely on or I feel good about working with, I'm not gonna stay around, right? So I just wanted to make that connection that as much as it is, these are all things that are very much look like that it's for our personal growth, for our personal reasons. There's very strong reasons that these are all related to workplace wellness, workplace inclusion, and productivity, really, because at the end of the day, all employers want productive employees, and all of these things that you talked about, having healthy relationships, making sure people can find a purpose in whatever they're doing, even at work. I mean, you talked about finding purpose outside by volunteering and things like that, but if I can't find purpose in my everyday work where I spend 1/3 of my life, I can't be mentally healthy, right? So I just wanted to make that connection between personal and why these are all related to workplace productivity and wellness and things of that nature.
So thanks, Sanjita. That's a perfect segue for us all to remember that a resilient culture at work is built one person at a time. Next slide, please. So we discussed the things that each of us can do and should be doing to build our own resiliency muscle. Businesses with resilient team members have higher productivity, lower turnover, lower healthcare costs, and higher engagement. And there are some really simple steps that you can take to build a culture of resiliency in your workplace. First and foremost, it's important to acknowledge the role that leaders have in building a culture of resiliency. So when we're hiring leaders and we're promoting leaders, we need to remember that we need leaders who are optimistic, decisive, integrity-based, and openly communicate. We need leaders to understand the role that they play in building a culture of resiliency. It's important that leaders practice and understand the principles of individual resiliency. Research shows that leaders who are open about the times that they have struggled and their recovery process create an environment where it is known that adversity is expected and embraced, but practice personal resiliency and learn, we're all able to fall forward. A second thing that needs to be done to have a culture of resiliency in your workplace is we need to create opportunities for our team members to be successful. I like to say success creates success. Research shows that people prosper when they experience success. We do this by creating an environment in our workplace where each person is able to use their passion and their talents. And this allows people to live their purpose at life. So for me, my purpose in life is helping people. So as long as I get some time during my day where I'm able to help someone feel better about a situation, that allows me to get through the times that I don't necessarily like numbers. I don't like numbers. But it's necessary for me to be able to deal with numbers to do my job effectively. What we know is when people are successful, their confidence grows, which results in giving them higher internal locus of control, which they need for healthy resiliency. A third thing that you can do that is very simple is we need to be able to provide our team members with the opportunities for observation and to have access. So what I mean by this is that we're creating environments where people have access to decision makers and input to decisions. We talked earlier about isolation. One of the consequences when people experience isolation is a lower sense of hope and confidence. If we want a resilient work culture, we need to look for opportunities for people to learn by observing others with effective resiliency skills. A great way to do this is to create cross-functional teams throughout your organization and business to work on problems and bring different views to the table. It's important those cross-functional teams are diverse in all components. Another thing that we can do to build organizational resiliency is to provide hope, encouragement, and support and mentoring. We've already talked about how important a caring relationship can be to develop resiliency. I would go as far as to say as anyone in a formal leadership role has a responsibility to have relationships individually with their team. Understand what people are going through and how to support them. It's imperative that we provide training and connectivity to help people address their struggles. In times like this that we're experiencing right now, every manager should be talking to every single one of their team members at minimum weekly. The conversation should look like this. We start with, how are you? How's your family? And we end the conversation with, how can I support you? And all that other tactical work stuff can happen in between, but people have to know that we care about them and that we're going to help them walk through this. A resilient culture takes the opportunity to innovate during these times of adversity. We don't want to miss the opportunity during hard times to ask, what have we learned? What have we learned about our customers? What have we learned about ourselves? What do we need to change about our standard operating procedure so that we come out of this stronger and better? I recommend that now is a great time to create and utilize those cross-functional teams to show the value of inclusive thought and to model how we can experience personal growth through adversity. We also need to recognize that we've got to invest in our leaders. We can't assume that our leaders know how to support people or have healthy resiliency skills. We have to teach them and we have to talk about it. We need to observe them utilize those skills. Are they reacting or are they responding? Sometimes we get confused and we think leaders can't show vulnerability and be strong at the same time. The opposite's actually true. Research shows that the most effective leaders are not only transparent about their vulnerabilities and their failures, but they also model healthy resiliency skills for their team by responding versus reacting. This allows the team to feel safe and follow their lead. And then last but not least, we need to make sure that we're investing in all levels of our organization, whether we teach personal resiliency, we've got to teach personal resiliency tools and skills. When we do that, we increase the healthiness of our team members. Healthy team members allow our companies to be resilient and move through times of recovery after adversity happens. Next slide, please. Zachary talked a lot earlier about the adverse impact of trauma. It's important that we know those warning signs and we're watching for them in ourselves and others. As a leader, most of us can't be counselors, but we can care and support the people that we need, support people get the help that they need. There's lots of really good resources out there. A couple that I'll just throw out there for you is Your Life Iowa. You can call 211 extension 8 and they can provide you with some referrals and access to other places. There's EFR. NAMI is a great resource as well. There's lots more. One thing that I think we're seeing in this pandemic that is very positive is that the insurance companies, Medicaid and Medicare are all accepting and paying the full rate for teletherapy, which allows people to get mental health counseling and therapy in the privacy of their own home. And it's removing barriers for people. They're seeing more people reaching out during this time than ever before. You know, in a perfect world, we would have team members who have the skills, tools, and mindsets to weather storms from day one when they come to work for us. But thankfully, we don't work with widgets. We work with people who have different backgrounds, different lifestyles, and different coping skills. It's so worth our time and energy to support developing individual resiliency skills. Doing so ensures that we have healthy families, healthy workforces, and a healthy community. So remember, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. We have included a list of resources. Hopefully we can send those out after the presentation so you have those and if you want to dig deeper. But in closing, I definitely want to thank the partnership for acknowledging the impact of trauma and resiliency on mental health and providing a forum for us to learn together. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sangeeta.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. That was great information, Sherry. I enjoyed every bit of it. Really took some notes. And just for folks who are wondering, we have recorded this session and we'll make it available for you fairly quickly. I'm just looking at a chat box to see there's lots of comments thanking you and Zachary, Sherry, both of you for the presentation. Very insightful. So I thank you so much again. So I think we're right around, what's our time here, 2:47. We just wanted to share a little bit from corporate perspective. Again, tying it to why is it important in the workplace? Why is it important for leaders? Why is it important for our employers to think about this? How is it related to retention, productivity, and things of that nature? I wanted to bring in Dana Lamberg from Wellmark, who is a benefits and wellness analyst with Wellmark Blue Cross Blue Shield, to kind of talk a little bit about what kind of workplace wellness strategies Wellmark had in place, how those strategies were helpful in the times of crisis. What were some of these lessons learned? Did we learn something new during this crisis that Wellmark had to respond to and say, gosh, gee, we didn't think about this, or we learned this and we need to incorporate this in our workplace wellness programs? And what are some long-term implications after COVID? I think there's going to be in every aspect of our life, whether that's telecommuting to different things that are going to be changed permanently. And so what are some of those things that we can learn from? So without further ado, Dana, are you on the line? We didn't get a chance to catch up before. Can you let us know if you are on the line, Dana? There you are. Give me just a second. I don't know, we cannot hear you. Give me just a second to see if you are muted. You are not muted, but we cannot hear you. All right, it says connecting to audio. Dana, do you want to say hi? Still cannot hear Dana, right? Let me see some chats coming through.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
I was dialed in through my phone and not through the actual Zoom. I've had issues with that, so hopefully it works okay.
Awesome. Go ahead. Thank you.
All
see
right.
our screen?
I can.
Awesome. Take it over.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be involved in this discussion today. As Sangeeta mentioned, I am here to talk from an employee wellness perspective on why wellness is important, especially mental health, as we get through this pandemic, and what wellness looks like at Wellmark and the impacts that COVID-19 has had, both short-term and long-term. And as I was trying to figure out think through what my explanation would be on why it's important to offer a wellness program, I noticed something that Sanjita had, a quote she had in her, and I feel it really connects to why it's important to have an employee wellness program right now. And it's from Maya Angelou, and it says, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And I think this is so spot on for what wellness should do for employees all the time, and especially in situations like right now. Wellness should really help create this experience where employees feel cared about, feel supported in all areas of their well-being: physical, mental, financial, career, and social. If they feel supported in all these areas, they're going to be able to come to work and do their job better, which allows the business long-term to be better. And I really think having that holistic view versus that typical view of just focusing on physical health is really important, because all these areas are connected. And if we are struggling in one area, it's going to bleed and leak into other areas. If someone's struggling financially, they're more than likely going to have some pretty strong mental distress, which that mental distress can bleed into their physical health, which then can bleed into their career and their job health as well. So, and if we go to the next slide, all these things are really tied together. But one area I think is really evolving is that mental and emotional well-being piece. And it's a really crucial piece to our overall well-being. It encompasses our feelings, our thoughts, our reactions to all those other areas. And our employee assistance provider, EFR, uses a really great visual reference for us. And they say, we all come to work or go through our lives carrying this invisible suitcase. And what we carry in that suitcase is different for everybody. In my invisible suitcase, I'm carrying the stress of raising a very strong-willed little girl who has a hard time listening and for some reason just can't keep her hands to herself. And the struggle is real, I tell you. I struggle with it every single day, and I struggle probably not only with her, but my reaction to her actions. So that causes stress for me, but other people are carrying the burden of relationship issues, stress, financial stress, substance abuse, and depression. And right now, many of us are really carrying that anxiety, worry, and those feelings of isolation related to COVID-19. So if we as employers can offer opportunities and support to help with these burdens in our invisible suitcase, it can really help to enhance workplace morale. It can decrease feelings of stress, which is going to allow us to do our work better. It can even help when we're feeling mentally strong, we handle those feelings of pain better. So we're going to have some pain alleviation. And then just overall physical, when we're mentally strong and resilient, our overall physical health is impacted as well. So next slide is, so what does wellness look like at Wellmark? And I would say wellness and well-being at Wellmark is continuously evolving. Over the last few years, we have really been embracing that holistic view of wellness. What we've realized is we haven't really had to add a lot. We actually have been offering so many things on all those different areas of well-being. We just have been communicating them and promoting them and marketing them in a different way. For example, for career well-being, we have a really awesome organizational development team that really focuses on career development, right? Helping people advance in their careers, learn more about themselves, we've implemented a program called Stand Out over the last couple of years that really helps employees learn about what makes them strong in their jobs. What do they love to do in their jobs? What makes them excited to come in? And it really encourages them to really do those pieces of their jobs more, and talk to their leaders about it. And I think this whole standout piece has been really important as we've gone through this transition to work from home. As people have kind of had those feelings of isolation, those stress, it allows, as part of the program, there's a weekly check-in, virtual check-in that you do with your leader. And it really allows you, as part of it, normally you'd say, hey, this is what I did in my week that I love, and I really excelled at this. It made me happy. It made me proud. And it allows the leader to check and say, wow, they really enjoyed working with the numbers this week. They really did this well. I should give them more work that focuses on their strengths here. It also allows them to say, hey, I really struggled this week. These are some of the things I struggled with. I didn't feel strong in. And it kind of makes the leaders take a step back and go, you know what? These aren't things that are really driving him, but I have another team member over here that really loves that. Maybe I could give this to them and take some of the things they don't love and give it to this other person that loves it. So it really helps that leader connect. And I think that's been really important, this check-in process during the work from home, because it lets them say, hey, how are you doing? What's been working well? What hasn't been working well? And gives them the opportunity to say, how can I help you? And how can I help you be stronger? So this has been really great. From a social well-being perspective, we have a team that does a lot of great work on inclusion and culture. And during this COVID-19 time, they have been really working to keep our workforce feel connected and inspired. They recently released a campaign called Wellmark Superheroes, where we can all they have resources where we can come together and share how we're staying strong, how we're supporting each other. It's really keeping us connected in this time of physical distancing.
So, Dina, before I go to your next slide, I just want to mention we have only 2 minutes left, and we want to respect everybody's time, but I think there's some strong correlation between what you said and what Sherry mentioned earlier. You talked about finding purpose and allowing employees to find that purpose in the workplace. You did talk about what Sherry was talking about in terms of being mindful and building those really healthy relationships, and again tying it up to it's strongly related to retention of the workforce. So we have 2 minutes left. I don't know if you want to just cover this, and we're going to come to a very close end of our presentation. And unfortunately, we didn't get a lot of time for Q&A, but I just want to make mention that for folks who are still on the call to please feel free to send your questions in the chat box, and we can allow personal responses after the event is over.
Yeah, I don't have a lot left. So, I mean, I think overall physical, we continue to promote people to be active, eat well, and also engage in those exercises that can build that mental well-being. We haven't made huge changes to our, our wellness program. I think what we've changed is our communication strategy, and is how do we take what we have and communicate it in a way that's more impactful now for employees, and how does it hit them now, and how is it helpful to them? So I think that's probably a big short-term thing. Long-term, biggest thing long-term is I think this whole working remotely thing could continue. So I think we, being an organization that has always been more on-site, we continue to learn how we can help people virtually and how they work from home and support them better in that way. So.
Thank you. I personally found it very insightful, all of the presentation from Sherry and Zachary and Dana. I apologize, we don't have enough time for Q&A. I have one question that I think we didn't get addressed. A lot of bigger corporations do have a full-time employee looking after wellness and things of that nature, but what can smaller and mid-sized employers do to provide the same level of support to employers? Anyone want to take that question real quick, and then we can close it out?
Well, I can speak to this quickly. Easter Seals is a small nonprofit, and we're probably medium-sized for a nonprofit. And I think the biggest, most important thing is making sure that we support and train leaders, because it's all about the relationship. And if you support and you train your leaders, then they can develop those individual relationships with your team members and help them through difficult times.
Awesome. All right, well, we are right at 3:01, and I really want to thank all our panelists, Sherry, Zachary, Dana, for making time, and all of you really for making time to join us for this important and timely conversation. Please feel free to continue giving us your feedback on what kinds of topics are top of your mind, and what would you like to hear about, what's bothering you, what are some resources that you're looking for, and would be happy to bring that to you. So thank you again, and hopefully see you next week for our Undesign the Red Line exhibit virtual tour. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Thank you.